Secularization. This is a big word, but I want to share with you some interesting findings from Europe. Some people, have realized that economic explanations really don't consistently explain this, so they've tried to look at cultural factors that might explain this fertility decline. And so, these folks mentioned here went out and surveyed Europeans about their various values. And it turns out, this is the result, that if you distrust the military, if you value imagination and independence and education over learning respect for others, if you value fulfillment in your job, if you find soft drugs, homosexuality, and euthanasia acceptable, not very proud of your nationality, you're more of a world citizen, and you don't have much identification from the little village you grew up in, and you seldom attend church, well, it turns out there's a very good chance you're going to have many fewer children than people who say the opposite to these questions, for whatever reason. Now, this might seem like a strange question. Does population control threaten our modern concept of freedom? I think it does. Many people are sort of surprised to hear that maybe I wrote this book, and I also wrote a book called The Next Progressive Era. But let me show you my take on this. Margaret Sanger, we all know her. She's the founder of Planned Parenthood, feminist icon. Hillary Clinton recently went to the Planned Parenthood National Convention and said that she aspired to be Margaret Sanger or be like her. Listen to the arguments that Margaret Sanger used to try and bring about access to birth control for women. No despot flung forth his legions to die in foreign conquest. No privilege-ruled nation ever erupted across the borders in lock of death, embrace another. But behind it was the driving power of population, too large for its borders, boundaries, and natural resources. And she's writing in 1920, the Great War has just ended. And she's telling people the cause of that Great War was overpopulation. And the way we fix that is by giving women more reproductive rights. Okay? That was a powerful point. Now we come into the 70s, the whole values revolution of the 70s, with the exception of the black civil rights movement going on in the 60s and 70s. Basically everything, all the big movements of the 70s, in one way or another, were drawing strength from the overpopulation meme, right? Gore Vidal, we are breeding ourselves into extinction. What do we do about it? Well, one thing we do about it is lighten up on gays. Well, it just is anybody's business, right? Lighten up on women, or increase opportunities for women, because obviously we've got to meet too many people anyway. Why should we be coercing women into roles of motherhood? Environmentalism obviously benefits, right? Think what it would be like to be an environmentalist if most people thought the world was depopulating. Think what it would be like to try and be to defend feminism. So overpopulation, or the prospect thereof, in a weird loop-to-loop, actually has brought us all kinds of progressive freedoms. And we'll miss it when it's gone. Dick Cavett is a brilliant demographer. If your parents never had children, chances are you won't either, right? I think what he was trying to make fun of social scientists, but he stumbled upon an extremely important truth. As I said, in the West, there's a great deal of diversity in people's reproductive rates. Now, I'm not talking about differences between race. Black and white have basically converged in their fertility rate. Hispanics have slightly more children than non-Hispanics, but their fertility is going way down and will converge in short order. But this is simultaneously true. In the baby boom generation, about 17% of us never had children, and another 17% had one, right? But there's a lot of people that had 3, 4, 5, 6, right? What does that imply for the composition of the next generation when you have that kind of pattern? Now here's a hypothetical society of 20 people. There's 10 women and there's 10 men. And in this example, the women have an average fertility rate of 2 children per lifetime, right? So that sounds very close to replacement. right? And it is for them. But it's a particular composition. There's Sue up there at the top. We can make stuff up about Sue. Maybe she's a super Mormon. Maybe she's part of the Quiverful movement. Maybe she's just irresponsible. But for whatever reasons, she had 5 children. And Jane wasn't far behind them. And then came Sally with 3. But look at this. Sue, Jane, and Sally, that's only 30% of their own generation. And look what they're contributing to the next generation, right? Wildly disproportionate, right? And of course, Emily down here and Hannah, now maybe Emily just waited too late and her biological clock ran out. Maybe Hannah was a ardent environmentalist who thought for reasons of global warming she shouldn't have children, so she didn't. So their composition, they're not represented at all in the next generation, except maybe through their ideas, right? But now we see that the bottom 40% of the population, the low breeders, right, account for only 10% of the next generation. That's huge, right? Now we can account for the fact that some of these women born to Sue the Mormon may grow up to say, oh, I'm taking the bus to San Francisco and renouncing Mormonism. There's going to be defections on the culture war side. But there's no chance that Hannah's kids are going to be secular humanists, right? And the way of the world is most people, particularly if they have children themselves, eventually come around to the religion and customs and ideas of their parents. Just to give you an example, it's hard to quantify, what is religion, or who are the religious, but here's trucking and stereotypes here. We have 2 states. One is Utah, which of course is the center of the Church of Latter-day Saints, 70% of the population are active members, and we have Vermont, which sends a socialist to Congress, and most of us would recognize as a rather secular, groovy place. Look at the difference in the birth rate, right? We find all over the world this correlation in every Abrahamic tradition, right? In Christianity, including Mormonism, in Judaism, in Islam, that the ultra-Orthodox, the fundamentalists, have much larger families than the liberal, the more secular. Now, why is that? Maybe when you have literal belief in every word of the Bible, you literally believe God's injunction to go forth and multiply, which is in all 3 texts, right? Or maybe when you're part of a tight-knit religious community, you have all kinds of people, all kinds of social capital that helps you to raise your children. Whatever reason, but that's it. That's the reality. Which raises the question, have we been here before? Have we been here before? Now, we don't really know what was going on in any kind of detail in the classical world. The Romans did have a census, as alluded to in the Bible, but we go back now and we can't really figure out who they were counting, were slaves count, so we really don't have any, but we have abundant literary evidence of what people in classical Greece and classical Rome thought was happening to their population. And so here we have Polybius writing just about the era when fast-breeding Rome exploded out and conquered Greece. And Polybius is trying to explain how that happened. And he says, in our time, all Greece was visited by a dearth of children, a decay of population. This evil grew upon us rapidly, without attracting attention, by our men becoming perverted to passion and show for money and the pleasures of an idle life. All right? Next cycle in history, we're up to Caesar Augustus. Caesar Augustus was so obsessed about the decline in Roman nobles' fertility that he passed these draconian laws, right? Slapped on bachelor taxes to any Roman that would not marry. And it turns out that Christians had just a slightly higher fertility rate than pagans surrounding them. And in the different plagues of the 4th and 5th century, they had a different pattern in how they responded to typhus in particular. So there's reason to believe they might have had a better mortality rate. And just this small incremental difference is enough to create to transform a small Jesus movement into this world-dominating religion in 300 years. So in that way, the future might be medieval. I'm going to end now with just one thought. Where do we go from here? And I will say, basically, it seems to me there's three roots. There's the Sweden unisex welfare state example, in which the state essentially comes in and heavily subsidizes and to some sense displaces the family. There's the Taliban route, which is gaining strength, right? Which is just basic, pure, old tribal male domination, patriarchy. And there's something I call the return of yeomanry. And this is the idea that one way or another, we figure out how to restore the economic basis of the family. So as in farm life, the family isn't just a unit of consumption, it's a unit of production, and that children have economic value to their parents. And when we figure out how to do that, I think we will have had our problem solved. So thank you so much. I'm very happy to take your questions and see where we go from here.